Hello everyone, welcome to my room. Hope you're well today, guys. Well, today should be Saturday, or is it Sunday? I'm not quite sure because I'm not releasing this video on the day that I recorded it, quite simply because it's a busy week and I just want to make sure that you get your content. So today I want to discuss a topic that I hope you will find interesting, which is the topic of the relationship between NISE and drugs, reality altering substances called drugs or recreational drugs, for instance. It is what I want to be part of a slightly broader series on experience altering substances, because it would probably be interesting to broaden the horizon of these substances. First of all, I think that I'm going to talk mostly today about psychedelics. There's more drugs than psychedelics, including more recreational drugs than psychedelics. So that could be an interesting topic to discuss. There's of course alcohol, which you could just say is a drug, but it's very democratic, and a lot of people, maybe the majority of people in the West, partake of alcoholic beverages from time to time. So that's another interesting topic, and it's different from psychedelics for sure in relation to NISE and the perception functions more generally, because that can also apply to NE and SI. I am taking the NISE angle for the most part because I'm speaking from an INFJ experience, so that makes more sense. There's also a third type of reality altering substance that I would like to discuss at some stage, which is antidepressants, because I think that there are interesting things to say about the experience of the INFJ, or the experience of the NIS user, or the experience of the NESI user in relation to taking antidepressants. How does that affect your perceptive reality, your perceptive life? I have come to the conclusion, also from personal experience, that it does affect it, and that is worth discussing. But today we're going to be focusing, like I said, for the most part on drugs and specifically psychedelics. Before I move on to my topic, don't forget, and Humphrey is checking that I'm saying this information correctly, I wrote 2 books in the recent few years. My book on the INFJ, the Ecstatic Soul, which you can check out at the links below, 95 reviews, 4.3 out of 5 on Amazon, so it's a little bestseller of its own account, so check it out. And also for less than 10 euros, my new novel, The Infinite Castle, which is a very nice product. You can get it for less than 10 euros and less than $10 as well. If you're interested in Kafka, Dostoevsky, Camus, existentialism, postmodernism, and tortured INFJ protagonists, this might just be for you. Okay. As usual, I like to thank my Patreon supporters as well. In fact, I released a very, very early draft of this video to my Patreon community as an exclusive kind of content in order to get some feedback and sort of better articulate the reflection. So, initially in that video that I released to them, I was talking about all types of reality altering substances, but I quickly realized that the topic was so broad that it was better to break it up into different, videos. How did I come to be interested in this topic? I think that if you remember the distinction between the proactive INFJ, the analytical INFJ, and the pure perception INFJ, so working pragmatic distinction that I've seen in the comments, because I always read the comments, that is they've been embraced quicker than I even thought. So clearly these different categories are useful to people, whether it be because people identify with specific types or maybe with an in-between between different subtypes. Regardless, it seems that both for me and for you, this is a useful categorization to use, so I will continue using it. I think that most of you may or may not, but most of you I think will be familiar with the work of Rupert Sheldrake. Now, Rupert Sheldrake is obviously the creator of the concept of, and you know what, it's funny because it's morphic resonance is the concept, but sometimes you're about to say a concept and this is exactly when you forget the name of it. Morphic resonance. the idea that, you know, memory, among other things, exists in the objective external world and not just in our minds. Many other things. Like, he's a very NI heavy INFJ, and for those who are familiar with his work, I think that it's very, very tempting to say that he's a quintessential example of a pure perception INFJ. The analytical part comes later, and the proactive part might not be very developed in him. But that's okay, you know, he's a great example of a pure perception INFJ, and that's great, and he's somewhat an enthusiastic supporter of experimenting with psychedelics. On his channel, there are discussions with other thinkers and academics who are doing research on philosophy and psychedelics. So clearly there's this idea, and, you know, you'll have Jung discusses that topic in his works as well, the idea that the use of psychedelics can be enhancing, experience enhancing, and therefore perception enhancing for people. So if we take, as you know, as our main angle of attack the INFJ type, for NISC people whose primary mode of, you know, operational mode of perception is the NI function, but who also have SE in their function stack and various issues or various challenges associated with the inferior status of the SE function, at least in that model. They seem to think that psychedelics are reality enhancing insofar as just because it is possible to find creativity and joy and stimulation, creative stimulation in music, a beautiful landscape, in a relationship, in a movie, in a book, so on and so forth, doesn't mean that psychedelic drugs are poor replacements for it. I think the stance on the parts of Rupert Sheldrake and probably a lot of pure perception INFJs, but I'm not claiming all of them by any means. I'm just saying Rupert Sheldrake and people in his community. The idea is that, well, why, if you're really already enjoying a beautiful piece of music or, you know, a beautiful landscape, beautiful scene of any kind, why not consider that if you're taking psychedelic drugs, you're actually enhancing that, you're enriching the experience, you're making it even more beautiful. So I think that if we were to think in NI terms, it would mean that you're nourishing your NI even more, allowing it even more content to process by adding psychedelic drugs to the offering, the helping of the real world without psychedelic drugs. So in some sense, you're allowing NI to be bigger, more creative, more intuitive, and to dish out more insights that are superior, both in quality and quantity. You know, essentially that's the idea. And I think that it's a very interesting kind of topic to approach, because I don't know what my stance is on the topic. I don't think it's that obvious. I have experience with alcohol, certainly. I've experience with antidepressants, certainly. And I have some experience with mild recreational drugs, weed, you know, being one of them, but also some, you know, some other ones. But never with psychedelics. I'm a little bit scared of psychedelics. And like I was saying to my Patreon supporters in that previous video, part of it might be due to something rational, as in, you know, there's always a degree of risk associated with that. You don't know what it does to your brain. But also maybe tied to the fact that I identify mostly to the subtype of proactive INFJ, which I think is the closest to the ENFJ, which for this reason, among others, is probably the type of INFJ that is the most controlling as well. Controlling of their, you know, liking to be in control of their environment, of the interactions they have with people, of the harmonization processes that they kind of supervise in this more or less direct way, but also proactive controlling over their body and their minds, and what happens to their body, what happens to their minds. And when you think that the psychedelic experience seems to be one in which there's a complete release from control, and the possibility of having a good experience, a productive experience, and not a bad trip, as you know, as is sometimes said, is precisely the release of that control. I'm always thinking that I'm not quite at the stage where I can release that control, and therefore maybe I'm condemned to have some sort of bad trip, you know. Oh, excuse me. It's a very hot day today, and I have the air conditioning on, and it's doing all sorts of things to my thirst and my sneezing, so I apologize about that. So essentially, for all these reasons, I've actually very little, maybe perhaps you could say just no experience with psychedelics. I've had experiences where there really seemed to be a psychedelic element, and at the time it was great, but what I could say is that in terms of what happened afterwards, it was absolutely no use to my creative process. Alcohol has been of no use to my creative process. What alcohol has done is give me the impression whilst I was tipsy that what I was writing was great, and then the day after I'd read the same writing, what I wrote, and I think to myself, oh God, it's not good. And all that the alcohol did was decrease my standards of what good writing is. That's all that it did. But I'm not claiming that's been the experience for everybody, whether it be alcohol or drugs, including psychedelics, always taken in very responsible doses, so on and so forth. I'm not going to repeat that whole shtick, but I'm not quite sure about psychedelics, because on the one hand you want to think, yes, that could be potentially really enriching your experience, but is it not possible that it also has the effect of distancing you from what your NI can absorb and produce naturally and organically? Could it not lead to a stage or state where you become dependent on these reality-altering substances to feel like you are in touch with your NI and the full breadth of it? Is it really something that can be a sustainable solution long-term? Or is it not just bound, in addition to all the risks that exist, right? Is it not bound to just make you less independent in the operation of your perceptual functions than if you were just not engaging? Do we need those? I don't think we need them, it's clear. But if we want to be maximally creative and maximally intuitive with our NISE axis, again, NISI axis for the non-NISE users, is this something that we ought to consider, or is this something that we can just ignore and consider that we don't have to do with them? We don't have to deal with them, we don't need them. I think that the question and the topic is complex, and in the first place, I kind of wanted to probe your views on this. I probably would have a lot more to say if I had experience, but I do not have anything like extensive experience, and I'm not particularly tempted to. But there are reasons also why they might be considered, including for what is turning out to be, according to some scientific studies, their medical interest. So please, if you have any thoughts on this, please share in the comments, and I will see you very soon. All right, take care guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.